Hello everyone, I'm Singbe Park, a philosopher of science at UNIST, Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology. In this video, I briefly summarize Chapter 8 of my book, Embracing Scientific Realism. The target viewers of this video are the philosophers of science who have already published and aim to publish more on scientific realism and scientific progress. There are four competing accounts of scientific progress in the literature. They are the problem-solving account, the semantic account, the noetic account, and the epistemic account. In this chapter, I defend a new account of scientific progress that I call the evidential account. I also explore how the five rival accounts of scientific progress relate to scientific realism and empiricism. Let me first summarize a historical episode against which the five rival accounts of scientific progress will be tested. There were two maternity wards in the Vienna General Hospital in 1846. The mortality rate of the first ward was approximately 10%, and the mortality rate of the second ward was approximately 2%. Semmelweis was puzzled by the high mortality rate of the first ward. He tested and rejected 5 false hypotheses before he reached the sixth hypothesis, which dramatically reduced the high mortality rate of the first ward. The 6 hypotheses invoked different factors to explain the high mortality rate of the first word. To put briefly, the first hypothesis invoked miasma. The second hypothesis, overcrowding. The third hypothesis, the medical student's rough treatment. The fourth hypothesis, the sight of the priest and his attendant. The fifth hypothesis, the supine posture. The sixth hypothesis, the cadaveric material from the autopsy room. In my view, Semmelweis was making scientific progress little by little when he tested and rejected the 5 false hypotheses one by one. It is wrong to think that he only made scientific progress when he obtained the sixth hypothesis. The problem-solving account holds the scientific progress consists in increasing capacity to solve problems. The replacement of an old theory with a new one is progressive, insofar as the new theory solves more problems than the old one. The distinctive feature of the problem-solving account is that it resists truth. To solve a problem doesn't mean to make true predictions. In my view, the problem-solving account cannot accommodate the historical episode of Semmelweis. Semmelweis eliminated 5 false hypotheses before arriving at the true hypothesis. None of the 5 false hypotheses was better than its predecessor in terms of the capacity to bring down the high mortality rate of the first word. In other words, the capacity to solve the problem didn't increase as Semmelweis moved from one hypothesis to the next in the series of the 5 false hypotheses. Therefore, the problem-solving account implies, absurdly, that Semmelweis's elimination of the 5 false hypotheses doesn't count as scientific progress. The semantic account asserts the scientific progress consists in increasing verisimilitude. On this account, scientific progress occurs when a new theory supplants an old one, insofar as the new theory is more truth-like than the old one. Scientific regress occurs when a new theory is farther from the truth than an old one. In my view, the semantic account cannot handle the historical episode of Semmelweis. No hypothesis was more verisimilar than its predecessor in the series of the 5 false hypotheses. Consequently, the semantic account implies, absurdly, that Semmelweis didn't make scientific progress. The noetic account asserts the scientific progress consists in increasing understanding. On this account, scientific progress occurs when a new theory displaces an old one, insofar as the new theory explains and predicts more phenomena than the old one. Let me test the noetic account against the historical episode of Semmelweis. In the series of the 5 false hypotheses, a hypothesis didn't explain or predict more phenomena than its predecessor. Consequently, the noetic account implies, absurdly, that Semmelweis didn't make scientific progress. The epistemic account holds that scientific progress consists in increasing knowledge. On this account, the replacement of an old theory with a new one counts as scientific progress because scientists acquire the negative knowledge that the old theory is false and the relative knowledge that the new theory is more truth-like than the old one. The epistemic account can handle the historical episode of Semmelweis. When Semmelweis tested and discarded the first hypothesis, he formed a negative knowledge that the first hypothesis was false. The same holds for the other 4 false hypotheses. Therefore, the epistemic account implies that Semmelweis made scientific progress. According to the evidential account, scientific progress consists in increasing evidence for our beliefs about the world. The evidential account originates from the fundamental view about science, namely, like philosophy, science is an evidence-gathering enterprise. Proponents of the evidential account have a slogan: where there is no evidence, there is no science. According to the evidential account, a scientific revolution counts as scientific progress insofar as we have more evidence for our beliefs about the world than before. There are 3 reasons for thinking that the volume of evidence increases after a scientific revolution. First, a new theory is more successful than an old one. Second, a new theory constitutes evidence against an old one. Third, the downfall of an old theory constitutes second-order evidence for a new one, as the counter-induction for realism asserts. Let me test the evidential account against the historical episode of Semmelweis. The evidential account implies that Semmelweis made scientific progress. For example, when he tested and rejected the first hypothesis, he gained observational evidence against the first hypothesis, and he gained second-order evidence for the second hypothesis. Let me now explore how the 5 rival accounts of scientific progress relate to scientific realism and empiricism. Scientific realism and empiricism assert, respectively, that a theory is true and empirically adequate. The problem-solving and noetic accounts resist truth, so they are incompatible with scientific realism and empiricism. By contrast, the semantic, epistemic, and evidential accounts are compatible with scientific realism and empiricism. Therefore, proponents of the 3 accounts can embrace scientific realism and empiricism without committing a contradiction. However, if they embrace scientific realism and empiricism, they commit more than their accounts require them to commit. So the principle of economy dictates them not to embrace scientific realism and empiricism. I just summarized Chapter 8 of my book, Embracing Scientific Realism. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.